Hey everyone! Today we're diving into a critical chapter from early Islamic history, the Ridda Wars, or as they're also known, the Wars of Apostasy. Now, these weren't just some random skirmishes. They were intense military confrontations that took place right after the death of the Prophet Muhammad in 632 CE. The Islamic world was in a really delicate position back then, and things could have gone in a totally different direction if not for the decisive actions of the first caliph, Abu Bakr. So, here's what went down. After the Prophet Muhammad passed away, many tribes across Arabia started questioning their allegiance to the new Islamic state. Some even went so far as to declare themselves prophets, which obviously didn't sit well with the Muslim community. These guys weren't just causing religious chaos, they were challenging the political unity that Muhammad had worked so hard to build. The situation was spiraling fast. Abu Bakr, who was a close companion of the Prophet, knew he had to act quickly. He couldn't let everything Muhammad achieved just fall apart. But it wasn't just about keeping control. There was a bigger, almost sentimental responsibility here. Abu Bakr had to protect the integrity of Islam itself. Now, why did these tribes rebel in the first place? Well, a lot of them felt that their agreement with Muhammad was personal, and with him gone, they didn't owe anything to the new Islamic state. They refused to pay the zakat, which is basically a kind of tax or alms, to Medina. This wasn't just about money though, it was a full-blown rejection of the new order. They wanted to go back to their old tribal ways, where they were independent and didn't have to answer to anyone else. Some of these rebels were just in it to keep their independence, while others were driven by personal ambitions. The most notorious of these was a guy named Musaylima, who was often called the arch-liar by Muslims. He was one of those who claimed prophethood, which was a direct challenge to everything Muhammad stood for. For Abu Bakr, this wasn't just a political threat, it was a deeply personal one too. So, how did Abu Bakr respond? Well, he declared a jihad, a holy war, to bring these rebellious tribes back in line. Within a year, he managed to crush the rebellion through a mix of warfare and diplomacy, solidifying the Caliphate's control over Arabia. With that sorted, Abu Bakr didn't just sit back and relax. He immediately set his sights on expanding the Islamic State into Syria and Iraq. So, with the rebellion in full swing, Abu Bakr knew that the survival of the young Islamic State was on the line. Medina, just like in the days of the Prophet, became the last stronghold of Islam. But this time, it wasn't just Medina standing alone. There was support coming in from all sides. When the Muslim troops returned from their campaign in the Ghassanid lands, Abu Bakr wasted no time. He rallied his supporters, calling on them to fight for a united Arabia. Now, instead of sending one massive army to take on the renegade tribes one by one, which would have left Medina vulnerable, Abu Bakr played it smart. He divided his forces into 11 separate corps, each one assigned to a different region. This way, he could engage the rebellious tribes simultaneously, keeping them from uniting against him or launching a counterattack. One by one, the rebellious tribes were brought back into the fold, either through military force or through diplomacy, something Abu Bakr was particularly skilled at. Within a year, most of the threat had been neutralized, but not everyone was ready to give up. The region of Yamama in the North province was still a major problem. Musaylima, the false prophet from the Bani Hanifa tribe, had teamed up with another so-called prophetess named Saja. By marrying her, he strengthened his position and built up a formidable following. Abu Bakr first sent two commanders, Ikrima and Shurahbil, with orders to keep Musaylima's forces at bay but not to engage until he gave the word. But both of them got impatient, rushed into battle, and ended up getting defeated. This only added to Musaylima's growing reputation as being unbeatable. At this critical juncture, Abu Bakr decided to send in his best commander, Khalid ibn al-Walid. Now, Khalid wasn't just any commander, he was a battle-hardened warrior who had earned the title Saif Allah, meaning the sword of God. Interestingly, He had once been on the opposite side, delivering a crushing blow to the Muslims at the Battle of Uhud when he was still fighting for the Meccans. But after converting to Islam, his loyalty and military prowess became one of the key assets for the Islamic State. When Khalid arrived to face Musaylimah, the odds were against him. Musaylimah's forces vastly outnumbered the Muslim army, but Khalid wasn't one to back down. The battle that followed at Yamama was brutal, so much so that the battlefield was later named Shu'ab-ud-Dam, or Gully of Blood. The fighting was fierce, and both sides suffered heavy losses. But slowly, Khalid's tactics started to pay off. He managed to cut down Musaylimah's forces to just a fraction of what they started with. And when Musaylimah himself was killed in the fighting, his remaining troops quickly fell apart. Khalid and his men seized control of the city, marking a turning point in the war. Although the fighting dragged on for a few more months, the writing was on the wall. By March 633 CE, with the final rebels subdued in Hadramaut, Abu Bakr had done it. He had united Arabia under the banner of Islam, securing the future of the new Islamic State. So, after crushing the last of the rebel forces, Abu Bakr didn't just sit back and celebrate. He knew that to secure the future of the Islamic State, he needed to solidify his control over the Arabian Peninsula and beyond. He used a smart mix of warfare and diplomacy, building alliances that would help keep the peace and prevent any more uprisings. One of the key moves he made was connecting with local leaders outside Arabia. Take al-Mutanna ibn Harita, for example, a chief from the Iraqi region who had thrown his support behind the Caliphate. Al-Mutanna began raiding the lands of the Sasanian Empire and quickly realized how vulnerable they were. He reported this back to Abu Bakr, and this was all the encouragement the caliph needed to send Khalid ibn al-Walid into Iraq. What started as raids soon turned into full-blown conquests. The Rashidun army, under Khalid's command, saw incredible success in Iraq, and Abu Bakr didn't stop there. He also sent forces into Syria, where Khalid eventually moved after securing Iraq. In Syria, Khalid's brilliance on the battlefield shone even brighter. Despite being outnumbered by the Byzantine Empire's forces, he led the Muslim armies to victory after victory. The battles of Ajnadin in 634 CE and Yarmouk in 636 CE were particularly crucial, breaking the back of Byzantine resistance and setting the stage for further Islamic expansion. By the time Abu Bakr's leadership came to an end, he had achieved what the Prophet Muhammad had set out to do: unify the Arabian Peninsula under one banner. But he didn't rule with an iron fist. Instead of punishing the tribes that had rebelled, he took their leaders as prisoners to ensure good behavior, and then released them when his successor, Umar, took over. This act of clemency showed his wisdom and understanding of how to maintain long-term stability. However, the aftermath of the Ridda Wars did change the social structure in Arabia. The tribes and individuals who had supported the Caliphate were brought into the ruling elite. Those who had stayed neutral found themselves on the outside, while the rebels, though not harshly punished, were kept at the lowest rung of society. Through all of this, Abu Bakr truly came into his own as a leader. His calm and decisive approach, along with his ability to exploit the disunity among his enemies, secured his position as the uncontested ruler of the Islamic world. One of his most significant contributions came after the devastating losses at the Battle of Yamama, where many of those who had memorized the Quran were killed. This loss led Abu Bakr, with encouragement from Umar, to order the compilation of the Quran, ensuring that it would be preserved for future generations. When Abu Bakr passed away in 634 CE, he left behind an empire in its infancy, an empire that would only grow and thrive under the rulers who followed. His legacy was not just the unification of Arabia, but the laying of a foundation for what would become one of the most influential empires in history.